នៅអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំសូមបកជាភាសាខ្មែរនៅអ្វីដែល Aaron គាត់និយាយមិញតាក់ទងនឹង Dr. Zeb គាត់ជាប្រធានគម្រោងហើយក៏ជាអ្នកស្រាវជ្រាវអ្នកដឹកនាំផ្នែកស្រាវជ្រាវរបស់គម្រោងឆាយភាពទន្លេមេគង្គគាត់ជាសាស្ត្រាចារ្យមកពីសាកលវិទ្យាល័យ Nevada នៅសហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកហើយក៏ជាអ្នកធ្វើកម្មវិធីតាក់ទងនឹង Net Geo នៅក្នុងកម្មវិធីត្រីយៈផងដែរហើយZeb គឺជាអ្នកបានស្រាវជ្រាវតាក់ទងនឹងត្រីធំនៅក្នុងទឹកសាបដំបងហើយកន្លែងដែលគាត់សិក្សាគឺនៅសិក្សានៅក្នុងទន្លេមេគង្គនៅតាមអាងទន្លេមេគង្គក្នុងប្រទេសទាំង4និង5ហ្នឹងឯង
Okay. So today's event has been a lot about films. So we just watched a couple of your films, and maybe you could tell us a bit about the motivation behind making them, maybe in particular the Monster Fish animated film that we saw.
Sure, yeah. So I'd just like to start by saying good afternoon to everybody. Thank you all for joining us today to learn about the Mekong, to enjoy these amazing films, amazing dance, amazing music performances. I apologize, I have a little cold, so I'm losing my voice. I sound a little bit like a frog. Yeah, so I'm a fish biologist. I have a PhD. I'm a biology faculty member at the University of Nevada. And when I was a graduate student, I applied for funding for my research to National Geographic. And so that's how I got involved with National Geographic. And one of the things that is very important to National Geographic is encouraging us to be better stewards and protect the natural world, and to do that through communication and through media. And so through my work with National Geographic, I got involved with doing news stories, video stories, and then eventually doing a TV program with National Geographic called Monster Fish.
បាទអញ្ចឹងគាត់សប្បាយចិត្តនៅក្នុងការដែលយើងមានពេលវេលានៅក្នុងកម្មវិធីនេះជាមួយគ្នាហើយគាត់ជាជីវវិទូហើយនៅពេលដែលគាត់បញ្ចប់ការសិក្សានៅសាកលវិទ្យាល័យគាត់បានដាក់ពាក្យយកមូលនិធិមកពីខាង Net Geo Grant សម្រាប់ប្រើប្រាស់នៅក្នុងការសិក្សាស្រាវជ្រាវរបស់ពួកគាត់ហើយតាមរយៈការធ្វើការងារនៅក្នុងគម្រោងនោះគាត់បានក្លាយទៅជាអ្នកពំនាំនៅសាច់រឿងហើយតាក់ទងនឹងការងារអភិរក្សទៅកាន់អ្នកផ្សេងទៀតហើយចេញពីការងារនឹងបទពិសោធន៍ទាំងនោះគាត់ក៏បានធ្វើព័ត៌មានជាច្រើនទៀតតាក់ទងទៅនឹងការអភិរក្សការផលិតវីដេអូហើយក្រោយមកក៏បានក្លាយទៅជាអ្នកដែលធ្វើកម្មវិធី show នៅក្នុងកម្មវិធីទូរទស្សន៍ផងដែរ
So could you tell us about how you got your start studying fish here in the Mekong Basin?
I actually has anyone in this room applied for a Fulbright scholarship or done Fulbright? Is there anyone here? So I actually got my start working in this region through the Fulbright program. And the Fulbright program is an exchange program where students from the US can go to study in other countries, or students from Cambodia can go and study in the US. So I actually applied for a Fulbright scholarship to come study the Mekong River here in Southeast Asia. And so I spent a year after my undergraduate studies doing research here in the Mekong River.
Excellent. And so you've since then traveled all over the world and seen so many different rivers. What makes the Mekong River unique?
Yeah, so the Mekong River, I study freshwater fish, I study large freshwater fish, and the Mekong River is home to more species of giant freshwater fish than any river on Earth. And so these aren't animals that we have a chance to see very often. Mekong giant catfish, giant barb, giant freshwater stingray, giant salmon carp, seven-striped barb. So there are all of these fish that live in the Mekong River that can get over 2 meters long. So they're very, very big fish. And just to get back to your point about sharing these stories, has anyone in the room seen a giant catfish?
មានអ្នកធ្លាប់ឃើញត្រីរាជពីមុនមកហ៎
One of the young eco ambassadors. Or a giant stingray. Has anyone ever seen a giant freshwater stingray?
ចោះមានអ្នកធ្លាប់ឃើញបបាយកាលពីមុនមកហ៎
Yeah, so nobody, I mean, these are fish that are only found in large part in Cambodia. But they're very difficult to see. They live underwater. They're not like dolphins. They don't have to come up to the surface to breathe. And so we know very little about them. One of the reasons why I got involved in doing videos is because Panara, so my research colleague, Cambodian research colleague, Panara and I would be out on the river in the middle of the night, and we'd be working with fishermen, and the fishermen would catch this huge 3-meter-long giant catfish. And we could see the lights of Phnom Penh in the distance, but we knew that nobody in Phnom Penh knew about this fish or knew about the story of the fish or knew that it was being caught. So we started taking videos to share the story of the fish with everyone in this room and people all around the world.
បាទអញ្ចឹងដើមឡើយគឺគាត់បានដាក់កម្មវិធីដាក់ពាក្យនៅក្នុងកម្មវិធី Fulbright ដែល Fulbright ជាកម្មវិធីផ្លាស់ប្ដូរការសិក្សាដែលនិស្សិតនៅសហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកអាចមករៀននៅអាចមកធ្វើការសិក្សានៅប្រទេសផ្សេងៗបានហើយកូនសិស្សនៅប្រទេសកម្ពុជាជាដើមក៏អាចទៅសិក្សានៅសហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកបានដែរអញ្ចឹងតាមរយៈអាហារូបករណ៍ Fulbright គាត់បានដាក់ពាក្យមកសិក្សានៅតំបន់អាស៊ីអាគ្នេយ៍យើងនេះដែលផ្ដោតទៅលើទន្លេមេគង្គដែលពេលហ្នឹងគឺផ្ដោតទៅលើការស្វែងរកត្រីធំធំហើយនឹងហើយដែលជាលក្ខណៈពិសេសរបស់ទន្លេមេគង្គដែលយើងមានត្រីធំធំដូចជាត្រីរាជត្រីគោរាំងបបាយ័កត្រីពព្រុយជាដើមហ្នឹងដែលជាទន្លេមួយដែលមានពពូជត្រីយ័កហ្នឹងច្រើនជាងគេបំផុតលើពិភពលោកហើយគាត់ក៏បានលើកឡើងនៅបទពិសោធន៍ដែលជាមួយនឹងលោកពូផាន់ណារ៉ាដែលពេលមួយនោះគឺធ្វើការសិក្សាស្រាវជ្រាវដើម្បីរកត្រីធំទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងព្រោះភាគច្រើននៅក្នុងបន្ទប់នេះដូចគាត់សួរហ្នឹងអត់សូវមានអ្នកគេបានឱកាសឃើញត្រីទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងទេអញ្ចឹងដូចយុគមួយនៅរាជធានីភ្នំពេញល្ងិតហើយគាត់ទៅដល់កណ្ដាលទន្លេហើយព្យាយាមស្វែងរកត្រីទាំងអស់នេះនៅក្នុងទន្លេជាគម្រោងនៃការស្រាវជ្រាវរបស់ពួកគាត់
So today's event is being supported by the Wonders of the Mekong Project. Could you tell us a bit more about what the project is and what you'd like people to know about it?
So the Wonders of the Mekong Project is supported by USAID, by the US government, and it's focused on water and biodiversity in the Mekong River and all of the different values of a healthy, connected Mekong River. So we really are focused on the incredible fisheries here, the productivity of the river, the incredible biodiversity, and trying to better understand and communicate the importance of the Mekong River and the Tonle Sap and the Tonle Sap Lake to people in Cambodia and to the world. បាទអញ្ចឹងដោយសារគាត់ជាប្រធានគម្រោងអច្ឆរិយភាពទន្លេមេគង្គអញ្ចឹងគាត់សូមបញ្ជាក់ថាគម្រោងមួយនេះជាគម្រោងមួយដែលគ្រប់គ្រងដោយទីភ្នាក់ងារសហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកសម្រាប់ការអភិវឌ្ឍ USAID ហើយផ្ដោតទៅលើការសិក្សាស្រាវជ្រាវដើម្បីស្វែងយល់ថាអំពីទឹកទន្លេមេគង្គអំពីផលិតភាពរបស់ទឹកទន្លេពីគុណភាពទន្លេហើយពិសេសតាក់ទងទៅនឹងជីវៈចម្រុះផ្សេងៗដែលមាននៅក្នុងទន្លេមួយនេះផងដែរ And so, for example, one of the reasons we work with Young Eco Ambassador and all of the staff and volunteers is Young Eco Ambassador organizes field trips out to the Mekong to see the river, to learn about the river. They also organize trips to forests in Cambodia. I've seen photos that they've posted of trees trees that I never knew existed in Cambodia, huge trees, beautiful mountains that I've never seen in Cambodia. So it's a way to get people out on the river or into forests or up in the mountains to enjoy the natural world.
បាទអញ្ចឹងមូលហេតុមួយដែលគម្រោងធ្វើការងារជាមួយនឹង Eco យុវទូដែលជាអ្នករៀបចំនៅក្នុងកម្មវិធីនេះផងដែរគឺដោយសារតែយើងចង់ឲ្យមានប្រជាជនខ្មែរយើងជាច្រើនទៀតគឺមានឱកាសបានចំណាយពេលវេលាទៅធ្វើដំណើរតាមដងទន្លេចូលទៅក្នុងព្រៃឡើងភ្នំដើម្បីមានពេលវេលាដ៏ពិសេសមួយជាមួយនឹងធម្មជាតិដែលយើងកំពុងមានហើយពេលខ្លះដូចជាយើងធ្លាប់ធ្វើកម្មវិធីដែលយើងធ្លាប់ទៅមើលដើមឈើធំមួយនៅខេត្តកញ្ចេះដែលយើងឈរដល់7-8នាក់អោបនោះបានអស់ហើយនេះជាអ្វីមួយដែលពេលខ្លះយើងអត់ដឹងថាអានឹងមាននៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាទេ
So the Mekong River goes through many countries. Why did you want to do a project about the Mekong River in Cambodia? What makes this country special?
For the species, for fish species, for the species, the kind of animals that I study, Cambodia is the last refuge, the last home for many of these animals, many of these fish. And it's also the same case for many kinds of birds. Despite all of the challenges that Cambodia, the environment and the river have here in Cambodia, it's the last place that a lot of this wildlife lives. And so there's a real hope here to protect these last animals that exist here in Cambodia.
អញ្ចឹងដោយសារទន្លេមេគង្គហូរកាត់ប្រទេសជាច្រើនផ្សេងទៀតហេតុអីបានជាប្រទេសកម្ពុជាត្រូវបានជ្រើសរើសសម្រាប់គម្រោងសិក្សាមួយនេះអញ្ចឹងមូលហេតុសំខាន់ដោយសារតែបើទោះបីជាយើងមានការអភិវឌ្ឍឬក៏មានការគម្រាមកំហែងផ្សេងៗទៅលើជំរកសត្វទាំងអស់នោះក៏ដោយប៉ុន្តែយើងនៅមានសត្វទាំងអស់នោះដែលជាសត្វកម្រសត្វជិតផុតពូជដែលមានតែនៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាហើយវាជាក្តីសង្ឃឹមដ៏ធំមួយសម្រាប់ការពារសត្វទាំងអស់នោះដោយធ្វើការនៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជា
So even though Cambodia's fish can get really giant, there's a lot that we don't actually know about them. So if there was one question that you could answer about Cambodia's fish, what would it be?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I've been working here for about 20 years, and it's actually very difficult to study fish in the wild here in Cambodia. The river's very big. It's murky. A lot of places are remote, so it's actually quite difficult to study. Can be quite difficult to study wild fish here. So I'm very interested in endangered species, these very rare animals, interested in migrations, how fish are moving throughout the system. But some of these fish, so that giant catfish that you saw in the video, you know, we're lucky if we see one or two of those fish a year. And so many of these animals that we're talking about, they're very, very difficult to find and very, very difficult to study.
អញ្ចឹងគាត់សូមបញ្ជាក់ថាការដែលសិក្សាពពូជត្រីដែលនៅក្នុងធម្មជាតិហ្នឹងគឺវាពិបាកមែនទែនហើយទន្លេរបស់យើងគឺធំមហាសាលដែលការសិក្សាដើម្បីទៅរកត្រីទាំងអស់នោះគឺពិបាកមែនទែនហើយអ្វីដែលគាត់សិក្សាផ្ដោតសំខាន់ហ្នឹងគឺទី1តាក់ទងនឹងពពូជត្រីកម្រដូចដែលឃើញក្នុងវីដេអូហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹងគឺយើងព្យាយាមរកឱកាសដើម្បីអ្នកណាដែលគាត់ចាប់បានត្រីកម្រទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងជូនដំណឹងមកហើយយើងទៅរកហើយនឹងថតរូបបលែងសត្វត្រីទាំងអស់ត្រឡប់ទៅវិញហើយមួយទៀតតាក់ទងទៅនឹងការសិក្សាពីការផ្លូវបំលាស់ទីរបស់ត្រីតើត្រីនៅក្នុងទន្លេមេគង្គបឹងទន្លេសាបហ្នឹងវាហែពីណាទៅណាអញ្ចឹង
And so one of the ways that we answer questions about fish here in Cambodia is, for example, one example of a program is there's a program here at the Royal University of Phnom Penh that's a master's degree in conservation biology. And our project has partnered with Royal University of Phnom Penh to work with Cambodian master students who are interested in the Mekong and want to help us learn more about the Mekong.
ហើយក៏មានគម្រោងក្នុងការធ្វើការងារជាមួយនឹងសាកលវិទ្យាល័យភូមិន្ទភ្នំពេញខាងថ្នាក់អនុបណ្ឌិតផ្នែកអភិរក្សជីវៈចម្រុះផងដែរដើម្បីជួយឲ្យនិស្សិតផ្នែកអនុបណ្ឌិតទាំងអស់នោះគាត់ដែលអ្នកណាដែលគាត់ចាប់អារម្មណ៍ផ្នែកទន្លេមេគង្គធ្វើការជាមួយគម្រោងដើម្បីសិក្សាស្វែងយល់ពីប្រធានបទផ្សេងៗនៅក្នុងទន្លេមួយនេះ
So what are some of the threats that freshwater fish in the Mekong are facing?
Fish now in the Mekong face many threats. We're going through a period of very rapid development now, and so fishing pressure is becoming more intense. Fishing is also quite difficult to regulate in many parts of Cambodia. There's more and more development of rivers in terms of hydropower, which can block fish migrations and have negative impacts on fisheries. So it's really a period of accelerating threats right now, and so it makes it all the more important to try to understand what's happening out in the river so that good decisions can be made as development accelerates.
អញ្ចឹងតកតងការកំហែងតកតងពពូជត្រីទាំងអស់គឺមានច្រើនមែនទែនដែលមានដូចជាការនេសាទដ៏ធំសម្បើមការនេសាទខុសច្បាប់អីជាដើមវាគម្រាមកំហែងហើយក៏មានការអភិវឌ្ឍដូចជាគម្រោងវិរិយអគ្គិសនីក៏វានឹងធ្វើឲ្យប៉ះពាល់ដល់ពពួកត្រីនិងគុណភាពទឹកទន្លេរបស់យើងផងដែរអញ្ចឹងហើយអ្វីដែលយើងចង់បានគឺចង់បានធ្វើយ៉ាងណាដើម្បីឲ្យតកតងទៅនឹងការសម្រេចចិត្តនៅក្នុងការអភិវឌ្ឍហ្នឹងឲ្យបានគិតគូរទៅដល់ការអភិរក្សហ្នឹងឲ្យមានទម្ងន់ដូចអ្វីដែលគាត់ចង់បាននៅក្នុងវិស័យអភិវឌ្ឍផងដែរ
And so as an example, like anywhere in the world, if people are considering building a dam, and this is true in the US or here or wherever, the goal is to maximize the benefits that we get from something like a dam and minimize the environmental impact. And that's why it's so important to understand the environment and understand the fish so you can make that decision about where to put a dam and how to operate a dam so that we get the most benefit and at the least environmental cost.
ចឹងដូចជានៅប្រទេសផ្សេងដែរនៅពេលដែលគេកសាងទំនប់វារីអគ្គិសនីគឺយើងធ្វើទំនប់វារីអគ្គិសនីដើម្បីទាញប្រយោជន៍ពីវាហើយក៏គិតថាតើធ្វើម៉េចដើម្បីបញ្ជៀសផលប៉ះពាល់ឲ្យតិចបំផុតតាមដែលអាចធ្វើទៅបានអញ្ចឹងអ្វីដែលយើងព្យាយាមធ្វើគឺដើម្បីធ្វើយ៉ាងណាដើម្បីឲ្យយើងស្វែងយល់ពីបរិយាកាសបរិស្ថានធម្មជាតិទាំងអស់នោះដើម្បីវាជួយឲ្យយើងក្នុងការសម្រេចចិត្តថាតើកន្លែងណាដែលយើងគួរកសាងទំនប់ហើយយើងធ្វើវាដោយរបៀបណាដើម្បីបញ្ជៀសនៅផលប៉ះពាល់ឲ្យបានច្រើនបំផុតតាមដែលអាចធ្វើទៅបាន
So if people are inspired after seeing all of the events of today and wanting to develop a stronger connection with the Mekong, what are some actions that you would like to see them take?
Well, I think a good place to start would be to volunteer with Young Eco Ambassador. But yeah, I worked in Cambodia for a long time. I'm inspired by all of you. I think that there's a lot of energy among young people and among students here. And so I love all of the energy that I feel in this room and when I work with Young Eco Ambassador. So yeah, I would just encourage everyone to get involved, look for volunteer opportunities, look up National Geographic on the web. If you're a student, you have a project, you could apply for a grant from National Geographic just like I did. So just take that first step, whatever it is, volunteering or maybe applying for some support for your research or doing something else.
បាទអញ្ចឹងបើសិនជាអ្នកទាំងអស់គ្នាចាប់អារម្មណ៍ក្នុងការងារទន្លេមេគង្គអញ្ចឹងអ្វីទៅជាជំហានទី1ដែលយើងអាចចាប់ផ្ដើមធ្វើបានអញ្ចឹងទី1គឺអាចធ្វើការងារតាក់ទងជាមួយនឹង Eco យុវទូដែលយើងមានអ្នកស្ម័គ្រចិត្តយើងនៅទីនេះអាចធ្វើការងារស្ម័គ្រចិត្តមួយយើងមានកម្មវិធីជាច្រើនទៀតក្នុងការដែលឲ្យអ្នកនរគ្នាបានស្វែងយល់ផ្ទាល់តាមរយៈការទៅ field នៅក្នុងក្រុងភ្នំពេញឬក៏កន្លែងផ្សេងហើយយើងនឹងមានកម្មវិធីជាច្រើនផ្សេងទៀតដើម្បីឲ្យយើងបានស្វែងយល់ពីរឿងនេះកាន់តែស៊ីជម្រៅហើយអាចនឹងប្រសិនបើយើងមានការសិក្សាស្រាវជ្រាវផ្សេងហើយត្រូវការថវិកាតាក់ទងទន្លេមេគង្គក៏អាចដាក់ពាក្យមកស្នើសុំគម្រោងអច្ឆរិយភាពទន្លេមេគង្គផងដែរ So ហើយអញ្ចឹងដើម្បីជានេះដោយសារតែនៅឆ្នាំ2020នេះនៅខែ5គឺយើងនឹងមិនមែនតែប្រទេសកម្ពុជាទេតែប្រទេសផ្សេងទៀតនៅលើពិភពលោកយើងនឹងធ្វើរួមគ្នាប្រពៃទិវា World Fish Migration Day អញ្ចឹងមានប្រទេសជាច្រើនពិភពលោកដែលគេធ្វើយុទ្ធនាការនេះដើម្បីផ្សព្វផ្សាយពីទន្លេពីប្រជាជននិងពីត្រីដូច្នេះEco យុវទូនឹងធ្វើយុទ្ធនាការធំមួយក្នុងការដែលផ្សព្វផ្សាយពីបញ្ហាទន្លេនេះទៅកាន់វិទ្យាល័យហើយនឹងធ្វើម៉េចនាំ យុវជនផ្សេងឲ្យស្គាល់ពីទន្លេបានកាន់តែច្រើនអញ្ចឹងអ្នកដែលគាត់ចាប់អារម្មណ៍នៅតុខាងក្រោយនោះមាន2នាក់គាត់កំពុងលើកអញ្ចឹងអ្នកទាំងអស់គ្នាអាចទៅចុះឈ្មោះដាក់លេខទូរស័ព្ទដាក់អ៊ីមែលនៅហ្នឹងទៅដាក់លេខនៅហ្នឹងទៅហើយនៅពេលដែលយើងចាប់ផ្ដើមជ្រើសរើសក្រុមការងារសម្រាប់រៀបចំ World Fish Migration Day យើងនឹងតាក់ទងទៅអ្នកទាំងអស់គ្នា
Yeah, and also to follow up on that, if all of you here, if you provide your contact information to Young Eco Ambassador, Wonders of the Mekong organizes events like this quite often, and so if we have your contact information, we would be happy to contact you when we organize additional events like this. Often there might be a need for volunteers or a need for people to get involved in a certain way, so certainly keep track of what we're doing on the Facebook page or by providing us with your contact information.
អញ្ចឹងដោយសារគម្រោងនឹងមានរៀបចំកម្មវិធីដូចគ្នាស្តៀងនេះជាច្រើនទៀតអញ្ចឹងអាចចុះឈ្មោះនៅខាងក្រោយក៏បាន follow page Wonders of the Mekong ក៏បាន Eco យុវទូក៏បាន
But while they're thinking of their questions, maybe you can tell us how did you get interested in studying fish?
I grew up in Arizona in the United States. It's a very dry place and a very hot place. And so I always loved being near the water growing up. I always tried to find somewhere with water, go swimming, go hiking, go camping somewhere near the water. And so I just grew up with a love of water. I grew up being very curious about the water, and that grew into a love for fish. And then kind of one thing led to another, and I ended up doing that. I ended up studying fish when I went to school, and now I have a career studying fish.
អញ្ចឹងគាត់នៅកើតនៅរដ្ឋ Arizona ហើយធំធាត់នៅទីនោះហើយគាត់មានចំណាប់អារម្មណ៍តាក់ទងនឹងត្រីនេះដោយគាត់បានទៅរៀននៅសាលាហើយផ្នែកត្រីនេះហើយទៅពេលគាត់រៀនចប់ក៏គាត់ចាប់ផ្ដើមធ្វើការងារតាក់ទងនឹងការសិក្សាស្រាវជ្រាវផ្នែកត្រីនេះតែម្ដង
Any questions out there? This is your chance.
Thank you so much for your sharing, and it's really inspiring to me to see such energy and enthusiasm. So because you really love to explore the water, my question for you is, what was the memory like the most memorable sight of a giant fish that you've seen throughout your exploration? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I think some of my most memorable times were so the place where giant catfish are caught here in Cambodia is only about 10 kilometers outside of Phnom Penh, up the Tonle Sap River. And a lot of times the fish are caught at night. And so some of my most memorable experiences are being out on the river. We have a little project boat, and driving out on the river at night. And it's very quiet, dark, it's very cool. And then you go up to the area where they caught the fish, but you can't see the fish because it's in the water. So you're driving at night, everything's quiet, you see the lights of Phnom Penh, and then you get up to the area where the fish is, and it comes up to the surface, and you first see it, and some of these fish are almost up to 300 kilograms. The fish in the video was a very small one. And so to just see these fish in the water, it's hard to believe that there are fish that big that live in the rivers. And so that some of my most memorable experiences are at night on the Tonle Sap River outside of Phnom Penh. Very nice.
ពេលវេលាមួយដែលគាត់ចងចាំបំផុតនៅក្នុងការធ្វើការងារនេះគឺនៅពេលដែលត្រូវទៅរកត្រីមើលគេចាប់ត្រីធំហ្នឹងនៅជីក្រុងភ្នំពេញអញ្ចឹងនៅលើដៃទន្លេនៅលើទន្លេសាបហើយចម្ងាយប្រហែលជា10គីឡូម៉ែត្រពីក្រុងភ្នំពេញទេអញ្ចឹងគឺធ្វើដំណើរទៅទីនោះនៅក្នុងពេលយប់ស្ងាត់ហើយមើលពន្លឺភ្លើងពីទីក្រុងភ្នំពេញទៅឃើញស្អាតហើយយើងមើលត្រីដែលគេចាប់ហ្នឹងអត់ឃើញទេរហូតយើងត្រូវរងចាំរហូតដល់ពេលគេលើកត្រីហ្នឹងឡើងមកហើយត្រីហ្នឹងមានរហូតដល់300គីឡូត្រីដែលយើងឃើញក្នុងវីដេអូនេះនៅទូចឡើយទេមានអាធំជាងហ្នឹងទៀតអញ្ចឹងពេលដែលគេអាត្រីលើកត្រីឡើងមក300គីឡូជាងអីហ្នឹងគឺធ្វើជាពេលមួយដែលគាត់ចងចាំមែនទែន
And so kind of a funny story about that is the first monster fish show we ever filmed was about giant catfish. We were filming here in Cambodia, and it was a really rainy night, and so the film crew couldn't go out with us because it was so rainy, but we heard there was a fish caught, so Panara and I went out to the river, and there was no film crew, so we gave our camera to the fishermen, and the fishermen filmed us tagging and releasing the catfish. So in that show, most of the video footage was filmed by the fishermen and not the film crew.
អញ្ចឹងនៅគាត់ចាំថានៅយប់នោះផងដែរគឺជាពេលដែលមួយដែលយើងធ្វើអាកម្មវិធីទូអញ្ចឹងគឺមានក្រុមកាមេរ៉ាដែលទៅថតជាមួយប៉ុន្តែដោយសារតែយប់នោះភ្លៀងខ្លាំងមែនទែនក្រុមកាមេរ៉ាគឺថតអត់កើតទេអញ្ចឹងតម្លាក់កាមេរ៉ាឲ្យអ្នកនេសាទអញ្ចឹងអា footage ដែលរូបភាពដែលទទួលបានហ្នឹងគឺភាគច្រើនគឺថតវីដេអូដែលទទួលបានគឺថតដោយអ្នកនេសាទទេអញ្ចឹងវាពិសេសម្យ៉ាងដែរសម្រាប់កម្មវិធីទូមួយហ្នឹង
I think we had another question over here.
What are the future plans that you have for your projects? What are the next steps?
Yeah, that's a good question. So our project will last, we think it will last until the end of 2023. So we have 4 more years, which is a good amount of time. We're going to continue to partner with Young Eco Ambassador and with Fish Bio and continue to do these types of events like the one we're having today. The project has 3 components. It has a research component, a training component, and an outreach and communication component. So what we're doing right now is part of the outreach and communication component, and we'll continue to do that stuff. There's also in the room a National Geographic writer, and he does stories for National Geographic about the Mekong, and that's an important part of our communication component of the project. The research component is a little bit technical, but some of it focuses on the Tonle Sap Lake health. Some of it focuses on fisheries and the health of the fishery and fish harvest. And then other parts are looking at trade-offs between things like dams and fisheries. So it's quite a broad project that has a lot of different components.
អញ្ចឹងយើងគម្រោងនេះមានរយៈពេលរហូតដល់ឆ្នាំ2023ហើយយើងនៅសល់ខ្ទង់4ឆ្នាំទៀតសម្រាប់ធ្វើការងារនេះអញ្ចឹងមានពេលគ្រប់គ្រាន់សម្រាប់យើងរៀបចំហើយគម្រោងមាន3គោលដៅទី1តាក់ទងនឹងការស្រាវជ្រាវអញ្ចឹងការស្រាវជ្រាវមានសិក្សាទៅលើគុណភាពសុខុមាលភាពរបស់ទន្លេសាបមានសិក្សាតាក់ទងនឹងការចាប់ត្រីផលដែលយើងចាប់ត្រីបានហ្នឹងហើយក៏មានសិក្សាតាក់ទងទៅនឹង តើពេលដែលយើងកសាងទំនប់វារីអគ្គិសនីទៅតើវាមានផលប៉ះពាល់ចំណេញឬខាតយ៉ាងម៉េចខ្លះផងដែរអញ្ចឹងសម្រាប់គម្រោងតាក់ទងនឹងផ្នែកស្រាវជ្រាវគឺមានភាពស្មុគស្មាញហើយបច្ចេកទេសជ្រៅមែនទែនទន្ទឹមហ្នឹងគឺមានកម្មវិធីបដិបដាលមន្ត្រីជំនាញហើយនឹងមួយទៀតគឺផ្នែកអប់រំនិងផ្សព្វផ្សាយដែលយើងធ្វើការងារជាមួយនឹងអេកូយុវទូតហើយនឹងក៏មានអ្នកនិពន្ធមកពីខាង NetGeo ដែលក៏ធ្វើការជាមួយយើងក្នុងការដើម្បីផ្សព្វផ្សាយសាច់រឿងហ្នឹងឲ្យបានកាន់តែទូលំទូលាយផងដែរ
And personally, I would also like to continue the work with endangered species, with endangered fish. We have a little bit of a challenge because the fish are so rare now, it's very difficult to locate them. And they also have quite a high value. And so without good cooperation from communities and from fishermen, it's very difficult to find the endangered fish now. So I would like to continue that work, but it's been a big challenge because the fish are so rare and it's very difficult to find them these days.
នឹងហើយយើងក៏ចង់ធ្វើការងារតាក់ទងនឹងផ្នែកត្រីដែលចិត្តផុតពូជបន្តទៀតផងដែរប៉ុន្តែដោយសារតែពូជប្រសារបស់យើងគឺនៅត្រង់ថាដោយសារពពូជត្រីទាំងអស់នេះគឺឥឡូវនេះគឺវាកម្រហើយវាមានតម្លៃថ្លៃមែនទែនអញ្ចឹងរហូតដល់រាបណាសហគមន៍មូលដ្ឋានឬក៏ប្រជានេសាទគាត់ចូលរួមសហការជាមួយយើងទើបយើងអាចនឹងរកឃើញត្រីទាំងអស់នោះបើមិនដូច្នោះទេគឺពិបាកនឹងរកឃើញត្រីទាំងអស់នោះមែនទែន
Any other audience questions?
Good evening, Mr. Zek. My name is Sain. I'm from Panyasastra University of Cambodia. Well, I'm proud of you that you come to Cambodia and then to do lots of research about giant fish in Mekong River. Well, my question is, do you have any plan to keep those giant fish safer or keep increasing?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's like, as I mentioned, it's quite difficult. You know, for example, for people who study very rare birds, you can go out and look for them and find their nests. Or if you're studying turtles, like one of our Mekong heroes studies aquatic turtles, you can see the tracks on the beach when they dig a nest. But with these fish, it can be very difficult to find them. One of the potentially good solutions are these community fishing areas and freshwater conservation zones. So in the Tonle Sap Lake, there are certain areas that have been designated as protected areas. And if there's good cooperation and enforcement of these protected areas, then those are areas where these endangered fish can survive, even if we can't find them, even if we don't know exactly how many are there. There are some techniques that you can use to help protect these fish. We're always working to try to develop better techniques to understand and protect the fish, but it's a big challenge. So if you have any ideas, I'd be happy to hear them. Thank you.
បាទអញ្ចឹងការសិក្សាតាក់ទងនឹងពពូជត្រីហ្នឹងគឺពិបាកមែនទែនដូចយើងមើលបុគ្គលឆ្នើមផ្នែកអភិរក្សទន្លេមេគង្គផ្សេងទៀតដែលយើងការពិព្រឹកមិញអញ្ចឹងអ្នកខ្លះសិក្សាពីកន្ធាយអណ្ដើកអ្នកខ្លះសិក្សាពីបក្សីអញ្ចឹងអណ្ដើកបើសិនចង់ទៅរកវាយើងអាចមើលស្នាមដែលវានៅលើឆ្នេរទន្លេបានហើយបក្សីយើងអាចទៅមើលសបុកវាបានប៉ុន្តែសម្រាប់ត្រីគឺពិបាកមែនទែនគឺយើងទៅមើលវាអត់កើតទេអញ្ចឹងអានេះវាជាឧបសគ្គមួយហើយអ្វីដែលជាយើងគិតថាជាដំណោះស្រាយនេះដោយសារប្រទេសកម្ពុជាមានតំបន់អភិរក្សជាច្រើននៅក្នុងតាមដងទន្លេនៅក្នុងបឹងទន្លេសាបជាដើមអញ្ចឹងយើងសង្ឃឹមថាបើសិនជាតំបន់នោះមានការការពារត្រឹមត្រូវអញ្ចឹងគឺត្រីទាំងអស់នោះអាចរស់នៅក្នុងនោះហើយយើងមានវិធីសាស្ត្រក្នុងការដែលធ្វើយ៉ាងណាដើម្បីឲ្យជំរកតំបន់ការពារទាំងអស់នោះខ្លាចទៅជាជំរកមួយដ៏ល្អសម្រាប់ត្រីជិតផុតពូជសម្រាប់គាត់រស់នៅទីនោះ
And I would just add that a lot of these protection measures, they can really be driven by even one person who really wants to make a difference. A lot of times when we see successful conservation efforts, whether it's with turtles or dolphins or elephants or fish, sometimes there's just one person behind a lot of those efforts that really cares and has dedicated their life to helping protect these animals.
អញ្ចឹងពេលខ្លះអ្វីដែលយើងមើលឃើញការងារអភិរក្សដែលបានធ្វើឡើងដោយជោគជ័យមិនខ្វល់ថាតាក់ទងសត្វបក្សីសត្វកធាយជាដើមពេលខ្លះរឿងទាំងអស់នោះវាកើតឡើងបានដោយសារតែភាពជាអ្នកដឹកនាំរបស់បុគ្គលតែមួយរូបប៉ុណ្ណោះបើសិនជាមានបុគ្គលតែមួយរូបគាត់លះបង់គាត់បដិញ្ញានៅក្នុងការធ្វើការងារមួយនោះគឺវាអាចនឹងជំរុញឲ្យមានគម្រោងអភិរក្សហ្នឹងអាចកើតឡើងបានដោយជោគជ័យបាន
Well, if not, then maybe I can close by asking you, what is your hope for the future of the Mekong River in Cambodia?
You know, Cambodia is a wonderful place with a very rich fishery, rich biodiversity, rich cultural connection to the river, as we saw with dance performance. And I guess my hope is that as Cambodia and the region and the whole world continues to move forward and develop, that we don't lose our natural riches or our connection to the natural world. So, and that's kind of one of the reasons that we're all here today, is to learn about Cambodia's rich wildlife and biodiversity, and to kind of keep that connection that we have with the natural world. Thank you very much.
ក្តីសង្ឃឹមមួយសម្រាប់ទន្លេមេគង្គគឺគាត់ចង់ឃើញប្រទេសកម្ពុជាដូចប្រទេសផ្សេងនេះតាមដងទន្លេមេគង្គមានការរីកចម្រើនប៉ុន្តែគឺអត់ចង់ឲ្យការរីកចម្រើនរបស់យើងធ្វើឲ្យយើងឃ្លាតឆ្ងាយពីសម្បត្តិបេតិកភណ្ឌធម្មជាតិរបស់យើងដែលយើងកំពុងមានដូចយើងបានដឹងស្រាប់ហើយថាដូចមើលវប្បធម៌របស់យើងមើលជីវិតរស់នៅរបស់យើងគឺយើងផ្សារភ្ជាប់យ៉ាងច្រើនទៅលើដងទន្លេមួយនេះអញ្ចឹងគឺបើទោះបីជាយើងចង់ឲ្យប្រទេសយើងអភិវឌ្ឍប៉ុន្តែយើងអត់ចង់ឲ្យទំនាក់ទំនងយើងមួយសម្បត្តិធម្មជាតិទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងដាច់យើងលែងមានទំនាក់ទំនងមួយទៀតទេអញ្ចឹងហើយបានជាក្នុងកម្មវិធីថ្ងៃនេះយើងធ្វើឡើងគឺដើម្បីឲ្យយើងទាំងអស់គ្នាបានរៀនពីត្រីរៀនពីសត្វព្រៃរៀនពីការងារអភិរក្សដើម្បីឲ្យយើងនៅមានឱកាសផ្សារភ្ជាប់មួយសម្បត្តិធម្មជាតិរបស់យើងតទៅមុខទៀតបានយូរអង្វែង
So I want to thank you for all of the important work that you do for the Mekong River, for the fish, for inspiring all of us, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you all.
បាទសូមអរគុណ